Okay, so it's a good time as any to start. Welcome to this edition of Mastermind with the great Tappan Wilder. I'm extremely excited about this conversation. We're going to talk probably about how we met during the class, but I just want to say how really our town has changed my life, changed how I approach theater. And it wouldn't have happened. It really helped define Miami New Drama, and it wouldn't have happened any of this without the generosity and vision of the Thornton Wilder estate, headed by my friend Tappan Wilder. So, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this is Mastermind series where we have wonderful conversations with theater artists, administrators, producers, and I'm actually broadcasting from my office at the Colony Theater, where internet is slightly better than at my home, and I hope that all of you can tune in to our archives and see the conversations, or tune into the next conversations that we'll be having. But today is extremely special for me. I never realized how much really our town resonates with me. Yesterday, I had to join a very dear friend of mine who was burying his mother. His mother has passed away, and we were there in the funeral, and it was a Jewish religious ceremony. I am also a member of the tribe. It's so hard sometimes to find logic and meaning in moments like that. And I think what kind of helps the most is Our Town. Just to read the third act of Our Town, I think is, it gives sense to the experiences of life in a way that I think it's extremely sublime, almost impossible, to find another non-religious piece of work that does the trick. And every time we are faced to moments like that, I think Our Town is the place I go where I don't want to feel that alone. Anyways, all that is to say that we have here the great Tappan Wilder, the nephew of Thornton Wilder, and I want to give you a great welcome to Mastermind classes. Thank you so much for being here. And also, I just want to warn, you are in the middle of a war zone, are you not? You are on the West Coast. There are fires around you, and yet you had a chance to log in today and talk to us. So for that, I'm very thankful. How are you doing, Tapi?
Well, the sun is out. I'm glad to report the sun is out, and the air quality was so good yesterday that I took a walk, and I went down to the Golden Gate Bridge area here. I'm on Marin County, and I'm glad to report that what was out there was fog and not smoke. So, good days and bad days. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here. And I'm on my iPhone because of problems with my computer caused. I would like to blame it on whatever I want to blame it on. But anyway, I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to be with you, because I tried to think, how could I start this conversation with such an extraordinary director who performed an extraordinary Our Town. And I came up with looking through some old papers, Michelle, I found a letter I wrote to one of the important people who support you, and I'm delighted that they do. And I apparently had written a letter, almost forgotten this, to support what you want to do with Our Town. And I want to just sort of quote from an opening paragraph from that letter. And then I'd like to, maybe your audience would be kind of interested in a few of the hot, great moments in Our Town and Thornton Wilder's life in relationship to the play. It's only 82 years old and going great. So, but what I wrote was Thornton Wilder conceived Our Town as a universal play about everyone and communities everywhere, and thus a piece of world drama. And he was gratified that within even 2 years of its February 38 opening on Broadway, it was being performed in several foreign countries. And this was only the beginning of Grover's Corners, New Hampshire, in an international address. Since 1939, our town has been performed in more than 40 countries in over 25 languages, a stunning testament to the universality of its themes and staging. I think we can raise those figures now, probably maybe I don't know, 45, 50 countries and more languages. And I won't run through the countries. But the point is that here you turn up at Idor a few years ago in New York, we might recall that, for a drink, and I forget, one of those hotels down there in the middle of the city. And you propose a production which is international, but is an American international play. And Spanish, English, and
Haitian
Creole,
yeah.
and one production. And these languages are American. They're part of America. And you don't, and so that they don't have to go abroad to be foreign. Foreign is part of our country. And I thought it was an absolutely extraordinarily exciting idea. I mean, I was a little worried that maybe it was a gimmick. I didn't know. Of course, it didn't prove to be a gimmick. It proved to be a remarkable thing you did. And I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon. I thought maybe the audience would like a few moments. I could talk a few moments about some of the highlights of Thornton Wilder as they relate to our town. How many hours do we have here?
We have roughly a good hour. By the way, I just saw that a good friend, Howard Sherman, is here on the Zoom. So we might even bring him up a little bit to talk about his upcoming work. I'm extremely excited about his book on our town. So I salute you, Howard.
So anyway, here's you have to go back to the early 30s. Well, you can go back to his youth and his whole training and background in the classics, where great ideas are written about the nature of men and women and their time, meaning all these large questions. It's part of his upbringing. But you go back to these one-act plays called Happy Journey to Trenton and Camden, Pullman Car, Hiawatha. Some of your audience are going to know these plays. And The Long Christmas Dinner, where he sort of tried out all the techniques that he used in our town at the end of the decade. There's a very important moment in 1935, and if there's time, I actually have a picture I thought it'd be fun to see later, of my father. And my father was Thornton's older brother, and he got married in 1935. And just 2 weeks after that wedding, in a list of what Thornton Wilder was wanting to do, and he always wanted to write an everyman play, he put M marries M. And that was the first identifying sign that Wilder had surfaced in Wilder's notebooks. M marries N. And of course, that's probably, I think, the oldest line in the play. M marries N. Millions of them, once in 1,000 times. It's interesting. Tough line. But he was at my parents' wedding in June of 1935, and it's there that he learned the famous tradition of the groom not seeing his bride till they met in the church. In fact, it was a garden wedding. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, made a great fuss about her future son-in-law, his name was Amos Wilder, not seeing the bride until they got married. And Thornton was absolutely thrilled with this. We know this because an uncle was rooming with him at the house at the time. So we know it's documented, and I'm glad to say that my mother's wedding dress is on display in that little town in New Jersey because of it, because our town was really partially born in Moorestown, South Jersey. So there you are. That's a little point. Then we go to Broadway, and I mean, many people know about the history of the play. But what isn't so well known, and it was something I discovered a few years ago when I was doing some research on the play, that after our town closed after 360 odd performances, not a great run, and it was released to the amateur market, it was performed towards 700 times in the first 20 months. That's an extraordinary achievement. I'm not privy to comparative statistics about the takeoff of plays after their professional opening, but I suspect that's that's possibly a record, is certainly in the top 10. Really an extraordinary achievement, and it's been part of our culture ever since. In fact, I think of our town as an institution rather than a play. An institution is an organization that represents something important. It's like a building block in our culture. And people have always, whenever I talk and I ask for hands, who knows about our town, it's extraordinary the number of hands that go up. People are in it, or they've sat and seen their grandchildren and blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on like that. They were, it's an amazing testament to a play, which is, as I say, part of our culture and part of world culture too. There's a long period that all you directors like to remember after the Second World War, where it's sort of remembered. It's remembered by most people with enormous affection, even nostalgia, but looked upon by pros often because of the number of high schools involved in doing it,
right,
as sentimental and nostalgic and
right.
Norman Rockwell like. Norman Rockwell, by the way, has been discovered to have some very hard edges himself.
Yes, no, but that's a beautiful thing about, yes. And I go to his museum. I do a pilgrimage actually to his museum every year, which I think is fascinating. But you know, that actually what you're talking about is something that I was immune of because I encountered the play later in life. I had, you know, there's no productions of our town in the high schools of Venezuela. So I first read it in my late 20s, and I couldn't believe that that play existed. It felt to me like the most modern, exciting, you know, beautiful play. You know, I reread a lot of the play this morning, and I took some notes, and then because I came here to the office, I forgot it at home. But I'm also reminded about that quote that Albert Einstein said about the play, of kind of being this weird extreme example of somebody touching the soul of humanity. And I think that for me, that is, I mean, the modern parts, the part about talking to the audience and all that, it's really exciting. But what really makes it last 83 years and still look 18 is because it touches humanity. It's a work of art that you read it, and that's what I was saying about, you know, about my experience yesterday at the funeral. It's our town. It depicts the human experience in a way that I am not aware of another art form, another, you know, work of art that does it as good as our town does.
Well, it's about, you know, things that we all experience, and you missed the high school experience, as you say. That wasn't part of the Venezuela,
right?
But you came to a country where a lot of people didn't miss that experience,
right,
and they remember it very fondly. In fact, one of the features that goes on, and you're part of it, Michelle, is we come down towards the end of the last century, and some very remarkable performances of the play. Everybody at your generation remembers Greg Mosher and Spalding Gray, and that's in the late 80s, late 1980s. It seems it seems like yesterday to me. And then we go on into the new century, and the kind of rediscovery by pros of the play, and the many ways it can be done. And David Cromer's name often comes up today.
Absolutely.
That was the world record run in New York at Barrow Street of 600. I used to know that number by heart, 654 performances. And, you know, just an extraordinary, and then beyond that, to a very exciting world. And in fact, a lot of people have rediscovered the people who remembered in their youth are now rediscovering the whole range of emotion, which is inherent in the play, which they didn't see and couldn't see. And I think the times in which we live, I don't know, tell me if you agree with this, Michel, the harder, in a way, Thornton Wilder plays very well in hard times. And we're living through very raw, difficult times. And I think the play speaks to it. It speaks to it in high schools. The high schools, boy, it's rough in a lot of high schools. They get it. They get it as they perhaps never gotten it before. But I think that's true of the range of professional productions. What's your view of something like that? How tough? Good, hard times being good for Thornton Wilder.
You know, Gregory Mosher, both a dear friend of ours and absolutely a mentor to me, and somebody that I consulted quite a bit when I was, you know, in the process of the production and before the production of Arton. And Mosher said something to me that kind of has haunted my production in a way. He said, you know, Wilder wrote this play in Europe as not Nazis, you know, the rise of fascism, the rise of Nazism, the rise of you know, communist Russia, the rise of Stalin. It was a very dark moment for the world. It was you know, a great. It was a dark moment for humanity, and he said that our town, it's his opinion, it's kind of a love letter to humanity. In case we don't survive, this is who we are in our marrying and in our living and in our dying. And I want to believe that to be true. You know, maybe in a subconscious level, that's what Wilder did. But that image of creating this in the midst of something terrible that it's about to wrap us up, I found very powerful.
That's true. I mean, he wrote, it's inspired, no question, it's inspired by his knowledge, close knowledge of the New Hampshire world, which he spent, I think, I say 12 summers, you know, many at McDowell Colony, a well-known artist colony, but also as a teacher up in Squam Lake. Oh boy, sorry. But he really polished the acts and worked on that important third act in Switzerland, in a little town called Rüschlikon, which I used to study a lot of German. I can't say it very well. Anyway, a couple of miles from Zurich, and there's no question, and it's very exciting that you have those. Thornton Wilder was an internationalist. That's what he was. He was an American/internationalist, internationalist/American. He wasn't in Paris in the 20s, although briefly he started his first novel in Paris in a cold water flat where you're supposed to do it, but he was only there a couple of weeks. And so, but he was in Europe all this time, and he learned so much from German theater, as well as his readings of incredible. He's an incredible reader and knowledge of theater. But to come back to something you said, you come in what's called the post-Cromer age period, and I think David kind of put a cap on that tradition, or that maybe that Greg Mosher was involved in. And there's a kind of freedom to explore it, the range of the play now. Productions by hearing and deaf together. But now we come back to your play and your production, and it's a kind of golden age for the play. It's the way I think of it as a golden age. Everything is clicking. High schools, professional productions. Just amazing that it is so important. And it's a play about every day, every person. And I'm not going to talk about the young scholars that are beginning to discover it, but they are. There's Jacob Gallagher Ross in Canada, for example, is writing really brilliant stuff about our town, fresh and new. There's much to explore about it. Tell me what surprised you when you got into producing it? Did you find any problems that you were surprised to encounter?
you know, the beauty of our town, you know, as a director, you spend years training with the idea of like, find the event. Where is the event? Find the event. You know, you know, and and what happens a lot, especially in the first act, is that it's in a way purposely uneventful, right?
Yeah,
It's
there's no
mundane.
drama. He tells you
There's no
exactly
drama.
what's going to happen. No, no, no
That's
drama.
right.
No, no.
And in a way, it's like, you know, like Brecht, it tells you, oh, by the way, that person's going to die later on. And by the way, you know, so, uh, and, uh, and you don't really know, you don't know if it's good or not when you're working on it. And when you're working on a traditional play, you know when moments are hitting, you know, but when you're working on Our Town, you don't know until there's an audience if this makes sense or not. And that I think is the most, you have to sort of trust the material, and the material is right there, and it holds up. uh, you know, I was also very nervous about the idea of multilingual art, because I was very honest with you, I thought it was an experiment. I didn't know if I had the hunch that it was going to work, but I didn't know if it was actually going to work. So I was very nervous about that as well. But you know, the play is so flexible. It's so, you know, it's so universal that it allows for you to do a lot with it. And you know, the more I started to understand why, you know, I then, after reading Our Town and falling in love with it, then I read The Bridge of San Luis Rey, and I think like I read it back to back like a couple times, because I thought that that is another example. You know, kind of my argument was always that Our Town is not, you know, and it's not my argument. It's of course, I think Wilder's own argument. This is not about small town America in the,
No.
you know, it's not. It's about being alive. And in the same way that Bridge of San Luis Rey is not about colonial Peru. It's about being alive. Period. I mean,
It also,
that's what. Huh?
it also, both Our Town and the Bridge are extremely brave artistic acts, uh, and that there's no drama in them. In a way, there's no drama. I mean, you
Right.
produced an extraordinary production later of the Bridge of San Luis Rey, but that's because David Greenspan was able to figure out a way to turn it into drama as opposed to a narrative.
Right.
Because in that novel, just like the play, you know from the end of the first sentence what's going to happen in the book.
Right.
So what's the story here? And Our
That's right.
Town is the same thing. The everyday life and all the little touches that make it work as a play, but it's nothing. There's nothing traditionally dramatic about it. I don't know whether that's too bold a statement or not. You're the director. I'm just the representative.
You know, there are moments, for example, there are moments that I'm just at awe of how smart and funny Thornton Wilder is.
Yeah.
You know, in a meta way. So, you know, we have, you know, all the comedies of Shakespeare end in a big wedding, and the wedding is the event, right? And then we have here at the end of the second act a wedding, right? But Thornton Wilder does something brilliant, which is he gives the event of the wedding before the actual wedding takes place. When Emily and George both kind of freak out, and Emily's father come in and says like, come on, you guys, like, you know, get it together. You love him, you love her. Now, you know, now go ahead and get married. And so that's the actual wedding. That is kind of like the moment where all the characters agree to get married. And then we have the ritual. And the ritual is so unimportant that we have a gossiper, you know, talking throughout the whole, you know, the whole ceremony, and making us distracted, kind of taking away the importance of the ritual. And I think that's just brilliant and outstanding, and a joke on tradition, you know.
I'm glad you mentioned humor. And when I have to come back about how you put dancing into your play, which was wonderful, by the way. I think I'm glad you raised that. You know, I think his favorite character is always the audience. he really believed in the audience. And, you know, that wonderful gal on the stage talking, you know, what a wonderful wedding, and she's crying and whatnot. It's very emotional. She's our audience. She's the audience. She's right on there, representing the audience, just the way the dead do later. And he's drawing them together and making them part of the show. And tell, how did you decide to do the dancing, for example?
So we're talking about. So
I've seen many performances of Our Town. I've never seen dancing that way. That was the first.
You know, when I think that, you know, the fact that so many great minds, so many great directors have done Our Town. I think Gregory Mosher, as we spoke before, it sort of gave, I think, kind of like the 20th century serious, smart version of Our Town, in which I think he discovers something about.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Tappy, are you there? I think we lost you.
Keep talking.
I think
Keep
we
talking.
might have lost your video. Okay. There is something. There's something wonderful about what Gregory discovered of the stage manager. I think Spalding Gray had always a secret. He was talking to us, but we knew that there was a secret in what he was saying, and sometimes we didn't 100%, believe him. And I think that he uncovered something in Our Town that really opened the door for all the other people really taking Our Town as serious as Moshe did. And then of course, David Cromer. There's just so many brilliant directors that have done wonders to the show that then you think, oh, why am I doing Our Town other than the multilingual? What else can a director bring to the show? And I've always found that idea of the end of the second act, when we were at a wedding and we were at our happiest, and then the beginning of the third act that starts in a cemetery of all places. And so, no, I mean, that's the thing. Like and then he makes a joke at the end of the second act, and then the third act begins, and it feels like a different world. So, I wanted to try to enhance that feeling, and so in order to first enhance that feeling, we created at the very beginning of the show, as the audiences were getting into their seats, there was Salomon Lerner, our musical director, was there on the piano. And as actors were getting ready out of costume, they were coming in and they were singing songs, kind of, from the Beatles to songs famous in Latin America, to sort of kind of create a community of actors, a community of individuals, of citizens, so it created the rules that we can suddenly all just sing together. And then the stage manager came in, everybody came to their seats, and the play actually began. But that moment of community creating at the beginning allowed us to create that moment in the from the beginning, from the middle of the second act to the third act, which is that we did not take an intermission. The wedding scene ended, and it became a party. And the music came back, and everybody was singing together. And we invited the audience to come onto the stage, and the actors were dancing with the audience member. It was ecstasy. It was 15 minutes of absolute ecstasy. And then, and unbeknown to everybody else, we were getting the chairs ready for the third act. And then suddenly all the actors were sitting down, and it felt as if the rug was pulled off of the audience who was just dancing now. And then they suddenly realized there was something happening, and they had to then take the seats. And that is kind of what happened in death. That's exactly, it's your 1 minute, you're happy, you're alive, and then the next minute it's all over. And so that's why we decided to do, that moment, enhance and allow the audience to live that thing, that opening that Thornton Wilder allowed us to examine.
And you had no trouble getting people to come up on the stage?
this is Miami. Give people an opportunity to sing and dance. They'll do it.
Well, that's part of it too. Isn't it part of a Latin? Is it an expression of Latin culture, right?
Absolutely.
And so
Listen,
that's wonderful. You know.
it felt like a Latin American wedding. That's the moment that the couples say "I do," the party starts. I think here you have the cocktail hour, and then the seating. So this really felt this felt like our weddings. It absolutely felt like it. So
let me throw something at you. This is really enjoy this. When I inherited the management of Thornton's estate, I got to know somebody that I think I don't know if did you know Howard Stein? Does that ring a bell to you? He was dean at Columbia of the School of the Arts, probably before you came.
Before I went there, right, yes.
I think he was one of the founders. He'd been at Yale earlier. He was a man of electric wit, and he was a theater person. He just bubbled and lived for theater, and he was wonderful. I want to ask you how this strikes you. We're talking now about our town at the end of the century as it goes into the 21st century, of which you're a significant part, by the way. He said of this in 1994, 95, thousands of Americans seeing our town over the years left the theater determined to spend more quality time with their parents, children, and spouses. This is smell the roses, and it's a kind of simplistic view. As laudable as such a resolution may be, the sentimentalization of the play would forever relegate it to the junk heap of prosaic drama. In thousands of subsequent productions in every backwater in America, the play's stage manager, whom Thornton Wilder wrought as a cryptic, mythic potentate, comes across with all the cold, omniscient grandeur of the Pepperidge Farm man. That's tough. That's tough.
Yes, sir.
I think it may be too tough. I really love this man. I sought him out for advice, but I think that's very rough. That's very tough. And I think Mosier and those were, playing around the edges of that.
Yep.
But I think it might have been a little difficult, and that's why I liked the warmth that you brought to it.
Yeah.
I'm for blankets and warmth, not just cold water.
Well, Keith Randolph Smith.
Is it a little tough?
I mean, but I think that's an opening of deciding what's the acidity level of the stage manager, and that when you decide the acidity level of the stage manager, it's sort of the overarching flavor of the play. I really liked, Keith Randolph Smith as our stage manager. He was able to be really sweet and present when he needed to, and completely cold, when the play required of him. So we really played from going to the Spalding Gray area to going to a much more, it never became, on the, some productions, the Newman, what's his name? What's Newman's first name? Oh my God.
Paul Newman.
Paul Newman's production. He was very charming and likable, etc. We never took it to that level, but certainly we approach likability. I think that especially in those scenes at the end, where I actually think is where the multilingual really paid off, when we were towards the end and Emily was talking to the mother in Spanish and then to a stage to a stage manager in English. I think that is really where you understood how language allow us to do certain things with in relation with the mother. I think that worked really well. And at that moment, I think Keith Randolph Smith, as a stage manager, really, hit the right tone between,
I agree.
you know.
I agree. And I think it was a really good lesson that figure of the stage manager has to grab on, has to really be a strong figure. And if the stage manager is always the part I wanted to play and never been asked to play it.
Notes taken.
No, I don't have the iron to do it. It takes real iron. He had the iron when you need it. And I think I've read enough of Thornton Wilder's letters to know that if the stage manager, I'm glad you raised his performance and described it just the way you did, because if a stage manager doesn't have, isn't running the ship with a strong hand, the play can really fall apart. It can really fall apart. Can I go back to humor, because there's an awful lot of humor in Thornton Wilder. He was a wonderful man to go out to dinner with because he knew how to laugh and how to make people laugh. I must say that your editor Webb was, yes. I think I've seen a lot of actors do that role, and especially the great line, well, how are you, George? And it's a great line. I never saw a finer editor Webb in my life. It was extraordinary. They're all wonderful. It was a whole experience. Being down with you was wonderful. I'm not trying to pick favorites, but I must say it was a remarkable performance. I'm so glad. Yeah. I just want to point that out to you. And he wasn't even raised an American. He was a Venezuelan.
That's right. We brought him from Venezuela to do the show. And by the way, this is the same actor that, if you were here on our last class, he played Uncle Vanya in our version of Uncle Vanya, and did that very smart choice of eating the flower. I think Luigi Sciamana is one of the greatest actors ever. I think that he and I think that experience also changed him deeply. He wrote quite a lot of, he did a lot of journaling while he was doing the play, and he found certain moments of sweet, there's just that moment where editor Webb is arriving home and Emily's outside after, and they have kind of like a small moment together.
Yeah. Oh yeah, very moving.
And Luigi made it such a sweet, beautiful moment that it was like, he created another one of those amazing moments, and then it's over. I think that he really understood. He understood the DNA of our town of Thornton Wilder. He's a terrific actor, and yes, I agree with you. I love that man. I think he's one of the great actors.
Well, I've always felt that the loneliness of my many of the characters in my uncle's plays, it's a lonely world they inhabit. Yes. It doesn't mean they can't laugh and they can't be joyful and experience life in their way as they're doing it, as they move along. He was a lonely man in many ways. As buoyant and wonderful as he was, it was a lonely life. He was, his home was a base. He was traveling much of his life. He did a serious writing, never could do it in his study. I came across a wonderful letter recently. I hadn't seen it in a long time. He said, I'm sitting in my study. I stir here. He said, he stirs. He simmers. He said, he stirs later. He lets it simmer. He's going to stir on a ship or in Switzerland or something. He just lets it simmer. That's what he does at home. And I just think of him as lonely. I think of his characters as lonely. And I think that makes them very modern. It's an American experience too. It's almost, we're both we're very lonely people in some ways. With so much around us that's open and available and closed. It's not I don't know what I'm saying. I'm talking about existentialism. And so.
Absolutely. Well, and Simon Stinson is kind of I think maybe the character that most represents that loneliness. That right? I mean, he's someone not suited for small towns, right?
Not suited, period. I mean, nothing to do, I think, with small towns. There's always people that are unhappy wherever they are. Interesting, yeah. How did you cast him? Was that difficult?
No, we had Andy Quiroga, who's a wonderful actor here, and when we did sort of the casting, he had that vulnerability and mystery, and I think that that is that's a character that really opens up a lot of things about yeah, I mean, there's many readings of it. There's obviously the reading of he's homosexual, trapped in this small town, and all he has to do to escape is drink. He maybe he I don't know if he would be unhappy in another time or in another in another setting in a larger city. So there's a lot of there's a lot of characters that really you can open up and imagine. Yeah. Editor Webb, I mean, he's a very smart man and educated man in a town with not a lot of people like him, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's very true. Absolutely true. Where's our town going when the pandemic is over and the theater's open? There are theaters that want to do it, and I heard just yesterday from Australia and Spain, and Italy, and it'll be interesting to see in the post-COVID times where our town goes next. And I don't know how many of your viewers know that there's an opera. Ned Rorem wrote it. J.D. McClatchy, the wonderful Sandy McClatchy, did the libretto, and it's a dance, it's a ballet, and it'll be very interesting to see the future interest in expressing ways to do it differently that my family and I can live with, because we have to pass on exceptions, and we're very open to some experimentalization, as it were, and we're glad to let you do it, and very exciting it was. Maybe I have a few pictures I can show now.
Yeah, maybe
what
it's
do
a
you
great
think?
moment.
Should we just
I
run
think
through a few moments?
Let's show some pictures.
Now, I mentioned that wedding in 1935, so I want everybody to see my parents' wedding. And my father is the bald-headed fellow to the left of the bride. He's 45 years, no, he's not 45, I beg your pardon. He's 40 years old. This is 1930. He was born in 1895, so he married on the late side. And Thornton is standing on the right. It was a hot day, very sweaty, and he was trying to get to Europe to see Gertrude Stein and get to Salzburg. And there they are. That's M marries N. And my grandmother made that great fuss about my father. It was a garden wedding. They didn't do it in church. So that's, her dress is on display there. So I just wanted you to see Thornton Wilder all dressed up looking like a penguin. You didn't see him that way very often. So what's next? Here's another family picture. You know, our town is full of family. Thornton Wilder, the phrases in it, a great deal of those lines were those around the family table. And this is, I thought, fun for people to see, because in the play, I believe it's the policeman who's comparing when George is a great ball player, one of the best ball players that Peterborough ever had, or Grover's Corners. But the policeman says, well, there was Hank Todd. He went down to Maine, became a parson. Well, Todd is a family name. And on the far left are Mr. and Mrs. Todd. This is a family reunion in a little town of Blue Hill, Maine, in the early 50s. I'm in there. I've got my hair on the right. I'm bald now. And Thornton's there with his glasses. But there's Hank. In fact, they lived in Canada. So Wilder made some license. He sent him to Maine. In fact, the Todds were in Canada. Wonderful fella. And just for fun, I think you should know that the commissioner of bridges in Maine is there somewhere. The picture I have, it's hard to see. Another Wilder. He's the commissioner of bridges and a well-known figure today because they gave a prize in his memory. Max Wilder, and here's his wife right next to Thornton. She ran Augusta, Maine. Okay, let's look at some more here. Now that's the original program. It's interesting. This is just a flyer that was just handed out. And this one actually comes from the Boston production, which is misunderstood as being just people didn't like it. Well, Depression was hit again very hard in this period. And there were a lot of people who did like it, and there was some good press about it too. But we remember it as they closed early to get it to New York in the end, where it was a success. And this is what the flyer looked like. Interesting that the Cartwright factory does very well here with a lot of smoke polluting the atmosphere. Now, Thornton Wilder kind of romanticizes, as it were, small town life. He never had to flee small towns. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was dealing with the way we remember things. And I once asked him whether he'd ever read Peyton's Place, a terrible book that my generation read under the sheets with a flashlight, you know. And he said he knew that small towns had a dark side, a very dark side. And he always referred people to Melville's short story, The Tartarus of Maids and the Paradise of Bachelors, which is a brutal depiction of a New England factory town. He knew exactly what he was doing. Let's go on. There's Thornton Wilder in 1950, as I recall, at the College of Worcester. He was a great friend of the president, and he's performing the role of stage manager, which he did on Broadway briefly even, and then in summer stock, and occasionally down into the 50s. Loved doing it because it learned a lot about drama. And if anybody wants to hear Wilder read it, they can go online at thorntonwilder.com, and we have audio of him reading from our town. They can hear his voice. There he is in a well-known scene against the traditional background of the Bear Theater. Okay, what's next? I can't remember. There we are again. This one's in color. And let's keep going. That is one of my favorite pictures sent to me by a friend of mine who directed this production in, I think it was, I recall, in Ohio about 1950-51. There's your traditional high school performance. Right. Hundreds of these, you know, once at least a day. I said there were nearly 700 in that first 20 months, and then after the war continues. That's the world that spawned many Thornton Wilder fans, and also people who learned about what drama was. They didn't need much on the stage. Let's go on. What's the next? Well, what can I say about this? This is an Italian production. I can't remember anything. This is our Elsa. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name. My fault. A well-known Italian actress who did it before the war, did Elsa
Martinelli. Howard Sherman saying it's Martinelli.
Yes, that's right. I think good for you, Howard. Thank you. She did it before the war and then after
Merlini.
the war. Merlini. Yeah, Merlini. Elsa Marlini. That's right. Yep, got it. Anyway, she was an older Emily, shall we say. Anyway, played it all over Italy. Yeah. Let's go on. This is a Japanese production, very remarkable. I can't help but when I see this picture, this is in our century and not long ago, can't help thinking that the dead here in Act 3 are also in foxholes, and you can't help but think of war and bombs, obviously, and very remarkable. All right, we go on. There's Peru, a Peruvian production of our town. I want to have some Latin presence in our show. And minister in a t-shirt, which David Cromer wore. Okay, here we go. One more. Well, Andre de Shields in Madison, Wisconsin, where Thornton Wilder was born. That is some stage manager. He played quite a role. A whole different interpretation. And we go on to Cromer. Thornton Wilder's first love was the audience, as it were. And the audience is seated right on the stage at Barrow Street. You can see how close they are. Those are the audience. I sat there myself. And there's David Cromer as a stage manager. So you get a sense of the intimacy of that production. And we go on to, let's just end this with Thornton Wilder playing the stage manager again, sitting on his stool, holding his script, looking a bit like the Pepperidge Farm man, but also trying to bring to it what he called the iron in the part. Well, that's a little bit of history, and I get out of the way.
No, so we continue with some pictures from our production, from Miami New Drama's production. We can. So this is kind of the, you know, as you remember, the actors were always present. They were always sitting. If they were not acting, they were sitting there in those chairs, looking and observing the action. We also extended the stage so that the first row would have their feet on the stage. First row of audience would share the stage with the actors, and that was, as you said, I think to enhance the idea that there it is, that's the proscenium going forward, that we wanted not so much distance between the actors, and the audience, and that's Keith Randolph Smith brilliantly playing the stage manager. We can continue. So great. So here's a picture with the subtitles, so everything there was in Spanish or in Creole had English subtitles. I think were we to do it again, I might have added, if they were speaking in Spanish, then I would subtitle in English and Creole. But you know, we did what we did then. I think it's great. We tried to project it just above the head of the actors, so that you wouldn't have to be looking up to read the translations. That's the wedding, and that's you know, our bare stage.
Wonderful colors. You know, it's a bare stage. Lighting is terribly important and not easy.
And David Lander, who did this, who led this project, it's an absolute genius. And you're right. And so here, this is the famous ladder scene that we didn't use a ladder. We used the steps that the stage had, you know, to create that iconic moment where Simon Stinson is in the back, he directing the choir, and George's dad, Mr. Gibb, is sitting there waiting for the wife to return, and Emily and George. I mean, it's just such a beautiful, amazing moment. We can continue. And that's a wedding. Once in 1,000 years, it's interesting. Or what is 1,000 times it's interesting. And that's, you know, of course, the famous third act. And that's Solomon Lerner, as you know, our music director, playing one of the dead folks. And yeah, it's beautiful. Maybe I think this is perhaps the last picture, is it? Or there's one more? That's it. All right.
I think it's important to let our hearers know that this production isn't over, and that Samuel French is going to issue a new acting edition of encapsulating your production. Very exciting.
We are very excited. That's sort of the big news of the day, is that Samuel French will have our multilingual Our Town available for anyone who wants to produce it. And we feel extremely privileged to be a part of it. And I was very humbled that you asked me to write an introduction to that edition. I can't wait for it to be over. I also just want to take another moment to thank the Knight Foundation for supporting this production of Our Town here in Miami. I think that investment allowed us to fully do this production with so many characters, and at a very early stage of the theater company. And I can't wait. This is, I've been terribly excited about this. I've been terribly excited about the, Howard Sherman's book that is also coming up. I is blessed to be a small part of the Our Town story. It's an absolute dream come true. So thank you.
Well, as I say, there's a lot to come. In a way, the golden age is going to go on for a long time. There's much to learn, and you've contributed to it, and I'm grateful for the chance to be face to face with you in this modern world that we encountered.
Well, I think this is a good segue to enter our Q&A section.
We'll do Q&A.
It's so you can do it different ways. Either people can raise their hands, virtually raise their hands, or they can ask the questions in the Q&A section. So Justin Schwartz says, Mr. Hausman, is there a chance your production could travel for a tour post-pandemic? Mr. Wilder, is a newly announced Broadway production still go for 2021? Well, I'll answer my part of the question. Listen, of course, it takes a lot of money to put on productions. I hope that we at some point get a chance to work on this show again in this version. But I am at least very happy that now this version, trilingual Our Town, can be produced by any professional theater companies, any high schools, with the Samuel French Concord acting edition. Is there so the question about the Broadway productions, would that still be?
Yeah, well, it's known that Scott Rudin, the well-known producer, remarkable man, I've enjoyed getting to know him a great deal, and I have enormous faith in him as the rights to do the play. There was a leak, I think a genuine leak, about possible ideas, but all that is in Rudin's hands, and we don't know where it stands because, of course, the theater is closed. I hope that Our Town will be back on Broadway soon. I love having Our Town on Broadway. It's been there before several times, and I think this is a timely time to have it. So I'm very excited about it. But I can't say any more than that because I'm just not, I don't know. And we all wait for somehow conquering this horrible scourge that is upon us all. And that's all I can say. Very excited about it, though.
Indeed. So at least, until we have the next questions, I don't know, Howard Sherman, if you are camera ready, but it might be a good idea.
Are there any questions before Howard? Are there any questions from the questions? Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
No, we're waiting for questions. There aren't yet any.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Three. So Jessica Mizell, trilingual production produced by Miami Drama with translators by Jeff Agustin and Nilo Cruz will be available for purchase and for productions very soon. Yes.
End of the month. Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right. Well, listen, until a question comes in, let's there's a Lowell Williams. Let's bring Lowell Williams to answer his question. Mr. Lowell, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's so lovely to hear you, Lowell. How are you
You
doing?
too, and you too, and Mr. Wilder, hello to you.
Yes, hi.
Hi, my question was, I saw, of course, saw the production of Miami New Drama, which I thought was outstanding. Uh, I'm an African American, uh, and so I was very interested. While you guys were talking, I Googled to see if any African American theater companies had done Our Town. And
Yeah.
Jessica just told me that Kenny Leon did it, but he is the only one that has done it. And if it's universal, then I'm wondering how it translates, how we can do a production, not done with immigrants, but with an all-Black African American company.
Yeah.
I'll just add
Yeah.
this, and then I'll let you talk. I think for me, if I was directing a production, all-Black production, to me, the stage manager is like a griot in African culture. He is the story relayer of history. So I would maybe use that concept. But I wonder what your thoughts are about this, as not the way you did it, Michelle, but in an all-Black company. Say Negro Ensemble Company, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
I think it's a terrific question.
There's absolutely no reason. I don't mean to jump here. I don't want to jump in. There's absolutely no. Thornton Wilder wrote a range of works, which are where he's always struggling to create characters who we can identify with on the ground, but also represent universal traits that are of a universal nature. And anybody can act those parts, any color. Nothing would be more exciting than to have an all-Black cast do Our Town. It would be very exciting. Why it hasn't been done, I really can't say. Certainly not. The family would never stop such a thing, and I hope it'll happen, and I think it will happen. We had a wonderful all-Black performance of The Long Christmas Dinner some years ago, which was, I couldn't see it because I was on the West Coast, and it was performed in New York City. But it was a marvelous show. Rosey Strub, who manages Wilder's
Who we love at Miami New Drama. Absolutely. She's been extremely helpful and wonderful. I just want to give a shout out to Rosey.
Yeah. Rosey saw it.
You know, I think that I think, Lowell, what you were describing, I think you have already a vision for what that production, how you would stage Our Town, and I think you should do it. I think that there's never enough, there's not such thing as too many productions of Our Town out there. I think that it's a good question. Why not more, all African American theater companies haven't done it. Maybe this is a project that our friends at Classic Theater of Harlem, who Carl Caulfield has directed their shows. He's a friend of the company. I would be very excited to see a production of Our Town by them. So I think that the beauty of Our Town is it is as universal. When we did our Town, we had family, Haitian family saying like, "Oh, that's it. You got what a Haitian family was like." And I said, "No, Thornton Wilder got what a family was like. Everything else that we put to it is redundant. Yes, Our Town, the Wipf family seemed like any Latin American family, but it's because it seemed like any family. We give ourselves this idea that we're all, so different from one another, that's just the layering. That yes, you change the layering and it feels different, but deep down, the experience of what it is to be alive, to fall in love, to grow up, to die is kind of, we all go through that.
Well, I think the doors have been open a long time. Many many actors of color have performed in our town. But obviously, it's probably kind of sub-level because of its so-called New England setting, right? People think of it in white terms. But all you have to do is be familiar with the international record of this play to realize that it is a universal work done around the world by people of all colors and persuasions. And I think in this country, we're coming to terms with that. And it's at long last, and I hope we are. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens in the next 20 years.
You know,
I'm only 20, so I'll live to see.
I think we might have a question from Cami that says, although I do see the universality of the play, I don't see how it'll translate into culture of any of the Scandinavian countries. Perhaps you can address that. I'm not a sociologist, but have wide experience with the area and just wonder if audience over there would appreciate it. P.S. Probably show my ignorance of a theater production by asking this question.
Yeah, interesting. I guess it's worth noting that the Scandinavian countries were, along with Switzerland, the first countries to produce the play. And there's a wonderful phrase from an early review, and again, this is a while ago, 1939, a shard, it's a piece of the shard of the universe. It was described as a shard of the universe. I've never forgotten it. And they do read it, and it is produced in that part of the world. I don't know of any country. I can't imagine why they wouldn't. I'd be interested to have a dialogue with your questioner to find out what her reasons would be for assuming that they couldn't produce it today.
Right. You know, I'm reminded now of. You know, Miami Drama has a very active educational program. We now bring in roughly 10,000 students from the public high schools to come see our shows at the Colony Theater. And we also create a show that travels in 30 Miami-Dade middle and high schools of the public system. And that kind of whole wing of Miami New Drama really began when we did our first experiment of bringing 400 students to see our town. And I invited David Charlin, our board chair, to join us for that 11 a.m. Matinee or 10:30 matinee that also had the beauty of having a talk back with Tappan Wilder. So that was the cherry on top. But there was something beautiful that happened in that production, which was that the students responded to every single beat of the play. Everything was funny to them. And, you know, the scene between Emily and George got them really nervous. And the actors couldn't believe what they were getting. They were getting all these, you know, beautiful gifts from the students. So much so that by the wedding scene, you know, when George leaves the wedding and Emily leaves the wedding, and it's Mr. Webb who brings them together, they were also filled with emotions that Luigi Sciamana, Mr. Webb, when he was saying, "Now listen, George," or listen, and he started to cry. He started to cry. And everybody started to cry on stage, and I started to cry, and David Charlin started to cry, and the play stopped. The play could not advance until he gets the two of them, and it's like, okay, you guys are gonna marry each other. And so the actors had to do like, don't worry, Dad. You know, and Emily was like, don't worry, we'll get married. Don't cry. Like, we love each other. Thank you for reminding us that we love each other. And I think that moment open up in us at Miami Drama as a theater company. We said like, oh, students, like why are we not bringing more students to see our shows? And that is how our education department began. So that, you know, that's a story. So we have a question, Mr. Wilder. Has there been any Zoom style readings or production of Thornton's plays? If not, do you feel his work translate well into this medium, says Justin Schwartz?
Yes, I think it would. Absolutely. And there's been, you go to www.thorntonwilder.com and you'll see a remarkable couple of minutes of a number of distinguished actors of color reading one passage. That's all that I'm familiar with in terms of Zoom. But I hope there will be more Zooming, particularly perhaps of the one acts even, for example. It would be very exciting to have the one acts. They're so important. Howard, you want to get Howard?
Yeah, let's get Howard. Let's get Howard. Let me look for Howard. Here is, let's bring up Howard. Give me a second. Now I have to figure out how to do this.
Howard Sherman has written a book which hasn't been published. It will be published next year.
Right.
Where he's interviewed a number of the participants in a number of the contemporary productions of our town. Yeah.
I think we have him. We have him here. Mr. Sherman, how are you doing? Can you hear us?
Michelle. Hi, Tappan.
Hi, Howard. Hi. Hi.
So how's your book? So could you tell us a little bit, Howard, about your book?
Well, Tappan certainly gave a pretty good précis. I have looked at about a dozen productions of our town since the turn of the 21st century. And the book is predominantly short oral histories from directors, designers, actors, few composers, about the experience of doing the play. And what I discovered, Tappan, I don't know that I've even said this to you, after I did my first set of interviews, I had a complete panic because I realized that I'd committed to writing a book in which the author, when it was first produced, told people very clearly what he wanted them to walk away from the play with. There's no mystery about what Thornton Wilder believed the play should do. So the book is certainly about how actors and directors explore the play and explore their roles, but there are also, it incorporates the stories of the individual productions, how they were done. There's a lot of conversation in the chapter about the Miami New Drama production, which was about the different cultural styles of making theater in Venezuela versus making theater in the US. So that was part of it. Obviously, part of it was just about how that production was conceived. Arnulfo Maldonado, who designed sets and costumes, talks about creating an empty space, that there's definitely a design in your production. You didn't just open up your stage. And of course, we saw a photo which, showed those cutouts from the steps from the audience onto the stage. And the idea that instead of climbing up on ladders, Emily and George sitting in those alcoves. So in fact, they were at the lowest point on the stage when they did it. There's interesting variety. And of course, one of the then there are very unique settings for productions. One of the productions in the book was a production done by the staff of an emergency psychiatric intake hospital in Pennsylvania that did the show for 2 nights, which was a result of a team building exercise there. They were not professional actors. It was just 2 performances. But what's fascinating is listening to these mental health professionals talking about what it meant to their mental health in the period. And the production that most people, whenever I mention it to them, are sort of stunned by, is that the last chapter of the book is about a production in 2013 at Sing Sing Maximum Security Prison. So to the gentleman who inquired about a black theater company, no, it's not an exclusively black theater company, because there are definitely Latino men and a few white men, but the cast was predominantly black. And the chapter talks about quite clearly how much the men initially resisted doing the play, how much they didn't see it, didn't get it, said, this is too white, we don't want to be a part of this. And now these men, some of whom have been released, some of whom are still incarcerated, talk about how profoundly this play affected them. And in fact, they seem to understand this play in a way that few people, that's just remarkable compared to most of the conversations I had. There's the line about people are all just shut up in their little boxes, aren't they? And
wow, that resonates in jail quite a bit, I imagine.
When you're seeing that in a maximum security prison, and when you have men who literally, they couldn't have intermissions because the men had to be back in their cells at a certain time, that casts the show in a different light. It hopefully, again to the question, the book opens up for people the idea that the play can be done in countless different ways. I have a couple of productions from England. I did not.
Howard, I think yeah.
When is the book coming out, Howard?
January 28th of next year. So we're a few months away.
When is it going to be available to pre-order it? Do you know?
Oh gosh, you're doing a commercial. I didn't anticipate that. It's available for pre-order now. You can.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because I think I pre-ordered it. That's what.
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. You can also find it at bloomsbury.com, which is the publisher.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Howard. I think we have to have, if you're available as soon as the book comes out, we would love to do a whole session to talk about your book.
That would be great. I'm sorry to have intruded on Tappan's.
No, I saw you. I got excited. This is a wonderful intrusion. I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much, Howard. We look forward seeing you very soon.
Thanks.
So thank you. We have one last question for Marcus Scott. This is a two-parter. Wilder is one of the rare talents that has taken home 3 Pulitzer Prize Awards: The Bridge of St. Louis Rey, Our Town, and Skin of Our Teeth. When it comes to themes and character, why is this play the one that stands the test of time? The second question is, in the time of gentrification, what can be mined from such a play, and what does Wilder say about culture that other playwrights have not? Interesting question. Mr. Wilder, any thoughts?
Well, it's a very good question, and it's true that when I took over the managing this estate, for example, in 1995, if for every dollar that the Wilders earned from those 3 plays that you mentioned, the Matchmaker, the Skin of Our Teeth, and Our Town represented about 50 cents on the dollar, and each of the other 2 plays a quarter, 25%. And over the years, Our Town has become increasingly more important. There are many reasons for this, but the other plays are by no means forgotten and by no means undone. But Our Town is the leader of the pack. But I assure you that in the amateur world and occasional very important professional productions, both the Matchmaker and the Skin of Our Teeth are done often. And the Bridge of St. Louis Rey is still read and now available as an audiobook, of course. And so it's it's too simple to say that Our Town has taken over everything. It casts a long shadow, but obviously it offers to the culture in which we live, and if not answers, questions that people feel consciously or unconsciously and come to of almost a religious intensity about the meaning, where meaning lies, and where we are as we try and get on with the complicated story of making lives in a complicated world, which has been for decades. That's not a very good answer, but I don't know how else to answer it, to say that it's not a black or white issue. There are many gradations, and our town is at the moment ahead of the pack, but the other plays are certainly not forgotten.
You know, I have one of my professors, Brian Kulik, said that, you know, maybe, I don't know if he was the one who come up with this metaphor, but he said the Shakespeare plays are like the solar system, and sometimes certain planets are closer to the sun and sometimes they're farther away. And you know, meaning that at sometimes some Shakespeare plays really resonate with what's going on in the world, and you know, and sometimes they're farther apart. I think that Thornton Wilder created a universal, you know, work not only of our town, but of all of, you know, all of his shows, all of his novels and plays. And I think it's just a matter of time until we rediscover them again. I think that,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, everything's in print. Everything is in print, and of course, you're, as a director, you know how better than I do, Michel, that some of the plays are very large and extremely expensive to do, and theaters can't afford to do them. The amateurs can do them, but the pros can't. They'd love to do Skin of Our Teeth. I can't tell you how many directors I want to do it, but I just can't afford it right now.
And Theater for a New Audience did a wonderful production of Skin of Our Teeth.
Magnificent, yeah.
That you know, that was critics pick. It won the Obie. I mean, so you know, definitely it is very much relevant. This is just a few years ago. It's a relevant, memorable production. So you know, I think that, yeah, you know, sometimes attention will go to one play and attention will go to the other, but you know, everything is, you know, I think all of them has taken the test of time, has stood the test of time.
Well, we'll have a musical of The Skin soon at the Public Theater, so we'll see. We've got lots of good things.
Well, I look forward very much to that. So that's a musical of Skin of Our Teeth. How exciting is that? Thank you so much, Tappan. This has been a really outstanding conversation. I am so happy we got a chance to speak. Thank you so much for coming in today. I'm going to leave this conversation returning immediately to our town, rereading it again, and dreaming of a moment where we can produce it again.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Stay safe with the fires and all the other issues that the world is facing. And for those of you know that this conversation will live on our YouTube channel. You can also access it via our website, colony.org, and then the archivals of the MasterMiND classes, as well as this class, as well as the past 40 classes that we've done. Thank you for everyone's questions. Thank you, Jessica, for helping. Thank you, Rosey. Mr. Wilder, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. And until next time.
Thank you.
Likewise. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.